So you conducted a study on the pickup artist community, and I think it would be the perfect opportunity for guys to learn about it and take away some valuable insights from your findings. In 2020, your study was published called Clueless, an ethnographic study of young men who participate in the seduction community with a focus on their psychosocial well-being and mental health. With the data collected in Canada from 2017 to 2018, what motivated you to explore the world of pickup artists?
Yeah, so I'm a professor in a department of psychiatry in a faculty of medicine. What that means is I'm particularly interested in understanding mental health issues, mental illness, and one of my focuses, like you said, is men's mental health. And I recently wrote a book about that, and I've done a lot of research on that topic. And we do know, for example, that significantly less likely to use an official mental health service in comparison to women, particularly young men, even when they have a mental illness such as depression, anxiety, social phobia. And we also know that men have higher risk of certain adverse mental health outcomes. They're more likely to kill themselves. They're more likely to engage in substance use behaviors regarding alcohol and drugs. So when you put all this together, the reality is that there are many men with mental health issues, but at the same time, there are not many men who are actually using mental health services. And that raises the question, what do men who have mental health issues do instead? Do they just sit quietly at home? Do they try and engage in activities on their own that try and improve their mental health, or do they join certain communities to try and assist themselves in their recovery? And one of my theories was that men who have what we could loosely call mental health issues, so that doesn't necessarily mean people with a defined mental illness, but people maybe who are lonely, who feel a lack of integration into society, who feel that they lack the skills and competencies that are necessary to flourish and be successful in our society. And also maybe people who do have clinical issues like social anxiety, like social phobia, men who maybe have some symptoms of depression and find it hard to leave the house and to engage in society. My theory or hypothesis was that uh, men like this might be attracted to some of the activities of the pickup community, the seduction community, because on paper these communities are uh, purveying skills that can be useful, that can address those mental health issues. So I really came at this as a men's mental health researcher who wanted to learn about these kind of issues. And the two driving questions in the research were why did men join the community and what impact did it have on them?
Mm. If you were to conduct a second study similar to this one, what would you change and why? What limitations apply to the original?
Yeah, so the study we did was really to try and get a lay of the land to understand how many people were participating, what the nature of their participation was, what were their knowledge, beliefs, behaviors, attitudes regarding the community, the reasons why they joined the community. What would be really interesting, would be quite difficult to do, is to you can measure using scientific methods people's mental health at any one time. Would be to do what we call a longitudinal study, where we kind of measure their mental health and their social integration variables before they enter the community, and then measure them again uh, when they are in the community, and then measure them again maybe when they've left the community, and to do that to see what kind of uh, impacts community has on them. And if we do that, we can also measure negative variables as much as variables around mental health and depression.
When you began your study, you found that there was a lack of research taken in the seduction community. Some of this research focused on looking at the written advice, such as books from coaches in the seduction community, like Mystery. You noted that these studies were limited because they didn't involve research with normal people involved in the community itself. How different do you think your study could be if it included looking at the influences of the seduction community's coaches and leaders, as well as differentiations between very active pickup artists and people who only dabble in pickup, or even those who have been doing it for a significant amount of time and those who are only very new?
In our study, we did ask people, we did ask the participants about their views of uh, the community, if we can use that, the teachers, the professionals who charge people to do boot camps or who produce content that you have to pay for. And the results we got were pretty clear in as much as almost all people said you have to take everything they say with a pinch of salt. That there's a lot of good advice out there, but there's also a lot of bad advice, and that you have to be critical about what you absorb and what you reproduce in your own life. And there was a recognition that some of these so-called instructors are better than others, and some of them have more better insights than others, but that everything they say does not necessarily apply to your own life. So we certainly didn't see what the media seemed at the time to be purveying, and which people say today about Andrew Tate, that these young men are kind of blindly following uh, the advice that they're given, and leading them to be creeps or perverts or sexual abusers. That was not something we saw in the study. And this was even those who consumed a lot of content. And I think that also speaks to the fact that in our study, everybody was in a kind of, it was a real in-person community. So people would get together and talk about these things, and be critical about the information they were given. So it could be different now, where there's less actual physical community, there's more online community, there's more online, people are producing online content rather than going to in-person kind of events. Um, so when we did the study, there was things like inner circles or layers, to use the terminology of the time. And we went to a few of these where people would present, and afterwards we would ask the participants, what did you think of that? And they would say, yeah, yeah, some of it was good, some of it not so good. I'm not sure I would do that. Or so um, that critical mindset when you're in a community like this, which, we have to be honest, does as a risk have a risk of teaching uh, teachings which could be harmful to other people and to yourself. It is very important to maintain that critical mindset and to have others to bounce the ideas off, and not just to blindly accept what's being told. And our sample, if I remember rightly, was certainly a highly educated sample. Many of them had degrees or studying for degrees. There were people who had critical thinking. So I feel that's important to state.
Hmm, for sure. Can you summarize for the guys watching what you found to be the advantages and disadvantages of guys getting into pickup artistry, such as negatives of getting too addictive to pickup? For example, in the last pages of the game, Neil Strauss wrote, instead of finding ourselves, we'd lost our sense of self. Mystery didn't have the answers. A blonde 10 in the two set at the standard didn't have the answers. The answers were to be found within. To win the game was to leave it.
It brings up the wider question of kind of meaning and purpose in life. And in the study, a lot of people did tell us that being in the pickup community for a temporary period gave them some skills that they could carry forward for the rest of their life. It gave them access to uh, materials which taught them new competencies. They made new male friends. Some of them had a lot of promiscuous relationships with women that brought them some pleasure in the short term. But there was a common sentiment that in the long term, this is not a lifestyle that is sustainable or is necessarily positive. Um, at the time, the people in our study, many of them said they were going to nightclubs, staying up quite late, missing out on sleep, that this would affect their studying and their employment. And as you mentioned, some people mentioned getting addicted. There is the negative side, which some people mention, that if they began to, I remember one guy in the study said he saw women as treats, and that's not a ethical standpoint to have in society, to see other humans as people that can be used or for your own selfish benefit. And as you said in the example you cited earlier about the one who engaged in self-reflection, there was many elements of self-reflection in this study. That's why we chose that example. So it's definitely a lifestyle which can bring some skills and competencies, but which for the people in our study was not seen as sustainable and desirable as you were getting older and as you were really trying to find your meaning and purpose as a man. And it really brings us back full circle to what we said in the beginning about masculinity. You know, what is masculinity? What is it to be a man? Um, Living a life as a libertine in a big city in Canada, you know, in the 1960s, or in the Victorian epoch, where there's a lot of, you know, the sex, drugs, rock and roll lifestyle, is that's not really bringing the sense of meaning and purpose to a man who was put on this earth, hopefully for 3 score years and 10, and has the ability to work in many different fields to contribute. One way to end this point might be to say that in the study we asked the men who were the men they most admired in the world, and a couple of them said like their father, and some of them said definitely not my father. But one name that came up a lot was Elon Musk. And this was in 2018, 2017. So it was, you know, when he was still, he had made big contributions then, but wasn't as well known. And we asked him to explain and said, this is a guy who had a mission. He saw why he was put on this earth. He's contributed to change society radically and drastically. And it wasn't, nobody said, oh, he's a multi-millionaire. Nobody said, oh, he's well known, he's famous, he's a celebrity. It was all about the fact that he had gone from nothing to create something which is of value for the world, produce something which has changed society. And a lot of them said that's the kind of thing that I want to have. I want to have that legacy. And then obviously few of us in the world are going to have the same legacy as Elon Musk, but to have something similar. And I think that's, to me, a mentally healthy mindset to have. And that's what we, as someone who works in the men's mental health sphere, that's what I feel education and health services should be focusing on when we deal with young men's mental health, is helping them get that sense of mission and purpose and giving them the tools to be able to do that.